Now to the final night of the DNC after nearly 50 years in public office, and this his third presidential campaign. Joe Biden formally accepting the Democratic nomination for president. His running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, joining him on the virtual stage afterward, helping to close out the Democratic National Convention. His wife Jill by his side. During his speech, Biden vowing to end a period of darkness, promising to unite America, stop the spread of coronavirus, and lead an economic recovery like the one he oversaw as President Barack Obama's vice president. He's also pledging to reverse what he called President Trump's failure to protect the country on issues ranging from the pandemic to foreign election interference.
What we know about this president is if he's given 4 more years, he'll be what he's been for the last 4 years. A president who takes no responsibility, refuses to lead, blames others, cozies up to dictators, and fans the flames of hate and division. He'll wake up every day believing the job is all about him, never about you.
Biden speaking to a nearly empty Chase Center near his Delaware home. If elected, he would be the oldest president ever elected at age 77.